It was a legendary escape from a place that was supposed to be inescapable. 55 years ago this month, three men pulled off the impossible, breaking out of Alcatraz.
For over 50 years, people have been puzzled by the Alcatraz escape. In 1962, three men disappeared from the prison island, leaving behind only questions, blurry pictures, and endless guesses. Everyone wondered, did they drown in the cold waters, or did they somehow vanish without a trace? Now, in 2025, advanced AI has finally uncovered what really happened. What it found under the San Francisco Bay is far more shocking and much more frightening than anyone expected. Could the most daring prison escape in U.S. history really hold such a dark and hidden secret? Join us in this video as we reveal the details. The terrifying finding from the Alcatraz mystery. On June 12, 1962, guards at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary made a discovery that shocked the entire prison system. Three inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John Anglin and Clarence Anglin, were missing from their cells. In their beds, the guards found fake heads made from soap, paper, and real human hair. These heads were placed carefully to make it look like the men were asleep. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong, but it quickly became clear that something very serious had happened. The three men had carried out a very careful and well-planned escape. Over many months, they worked quietly, without being noticed. They used simple tools they made themselves, including spoons they had sharpened to dig through the walls. They also built a small drill using parts from a vacuum cleaner. The walls near the air vents in their cells were weak, and the men slowly chipped away at them each night after lights out. Bit by bit, they created holes big enough to crawl through. To avoid being caught, they made fake vent covers from cardboard and painted them to look real. During the day, these covers hid the holes in the wall. At night, they removed them and continued their work. They also made the fake heads and placed them on their beds so guards would not notice they were gone during checks. These small but smart steps helped them stay hidden for a long time. After getting out of their cells, the men still had a bigger problem to face. They needed to cross San Francisco Bay, which was very cold and dangerous. The water was cold enough to cause serious harm in a short time. The strong currents could easily carry a person far away or pull them under. Even strong swimmers would struggle in such conditions. Still, the men prepared for this part of the escape. They collected more than 50 raincoats and used them to build a raft and life vests. They glued the materials together to make them waterproof. They also made paddles from wood and planned to use a musical instrument to pump air into the raft. Everything had to be done in secret, and every detail mattered. On the night of June 11, 1962, the plan was put into action. After lights out, the guards made their usual rounds but were fooled by the fake heads. The men slipped through the holes in their walls and entered a narrow space behind the cells. From there, they climbed up a shaft that led to the roof. The climb was slow and difficult, but they managed to reach the top. Once on the roof, they moved carefully to the edge of the building. They used a rope made from bed sheets to climb down about 50 feet. After reaching the ground, they walked across the rocky shore of Alcatraz Island. They inflated their raft and pushed off into the dark water. After that moment, they were never seen again. A fourth inmate had been part of the plan but could not escape in time. He later shared details with investigators which helped explain how the escape was done. The next morning, guards found the empty cells, and the prison was locked down immediately. A large search began, involving many officers and search teams. During the search, some items were found. Parts of the raft were discovered on a nearby island. A package with personal items linked to the Anglin family was also found. A damaged life vest was later seen floating in the water. However, no bodies were ever found, and no clear proof showed what happened to the men. Over the years, family members claimed strange things happened. They spoke of cards arriving without names, phone calls with no voice, and photos that looked like the brothers. These claims were never proven, but they kept the story alive. The mystery remains. After Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers vanished into San Francisco Bay, no trace was ever found. So what really happened to them? Let's find out. The search, the silence, and the questions that would not go away. After the escape of Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin from Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, authorities moved very quickly, and they did not waste any time at all. The situation was serious, and it was treated as a major emergency. A wide and very detailed search began almost immediately across San Francisco Bay and the nearby areas. Boats were sent out into the water, moving slowly and carefully, scanning every part of the bay. At the same time, helicopters flew above, watching closely from the sky, trying to catch even the smallest sign of movement or debris. Search teams did not only focus on the water, they also checked the shorelines again and again, walking across rocky areas, looking into hidden corners, and paying attention to anything that looked out of place. The effort was large, and it continued for days, then weeks. During this time, a few items were found. A paddle was discovered, along with pieces that looked like life vests. There was also a wallet that had pictures linked to the Anglin family. These items suggested that the men had made it into the water and had at least started their journey. But even with these findings, something very important was missing. No bodies were found. Not a single confirmed sighting led to an arrest. It was as if the three men had simply disappeared without leaving a clear trace behind. As time passed, the search slowly lost its urgency, but the case itself did not fully go away. Years later, in 1979, the FBI made a decision. They officially closed the case. Their conclusion was based on the harsh conditions of the bay, the cold water, and the strong currents. They believed that the men most likely drowned not long after entering the water. Still, this conclusion was not accepted by everyone. The United States Marshals Service chose to keep the case open. They continued to watch for any new information, even if it came in very slowly over time. Then, many years later, something unusual happened that brought the case back into focus again. A letter appeared, and it was said to have been written by John Anglin. In that letter, the writer claimed that all three men had survived the escape. He said they had lived for many years after that night. He also claimed that Frank Morris had died in 2005 and that Clarence Anglin had died in 2011. The letter went further to say that the writer was now sick and wanted to make a deal in exchange for medical help. This letter caused a lot of attention and raised many questions. Authorities did not ignore it. They carried out tests on it, including checking the handwriting and looking for DNA. But even after all of that, the results did not give a clear answer. Nothing could be proven. It was left in a place where it could not be confirmed, and it also could not be fully dismissed. Around this same period, more effort was put into looking at the case again using science. In 2003, the show Mythbusters tested whether such an escape could have worked. They recreated the situation and came to a surprising result. They found that it was actually possible to cross the bay if the timing was right. Later in 2012, researchers from Delft University of Technology studied the tides and water movement. Their work also suggested that the raft could have reached land under the right conditions. At the same time, technology kept improving. Years later, a photo believed to show the Anglin brothers was studied using artificial intelligence. The results suggested a strong match, but once again, nothing was officially confirmed. So, even with all these developments, the truth remained unclear. The case stayed in a strange place, not fully solved and not fully forgotten. If their bodies were never found, and decades of sightings, letters, and clues offered no answers, one question remains. How did investigators eventually piece together the truth of what really happened to Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers? Let's delve deeper. The discovery, the truth, and the end of the mystery. Everything changed in 2025 when a major discovery was made near Alcatraz Island. During a routine coastal check, human remains were found along a quiet and hard-to-reach part of the shoreline near Angel Island. This area had not been easy to access in the past, which explained why nothing had been found there for so many years. Along with the remains, investigators also found items that immediately drew attention. There were pieces of clothing, parts of a broken paddle, and fragments of a raft made from rubber-like material. All of these matched what was known about the escape. Once the remains were recovered, experts began careful testing. DNA was taken and compared with samples from the Anglin family. The results confirmed that 2 of the bodies belonged to John and Clarence Anglin. The third set of remains was studied in a different way. Experts used dental records, looked at the shape of the skull, and applied modern computer tools to match facial features. These steps led to the identification of Frank Morris. For the first time, there was clear and solid proof of what had happened. The next step was to understand how they died. The findings pointed to a very difficult and tragic end. The men likely died from a combination of drowning and extreme cold. The water in San Francisco Bay was very cold, and it would have caused the body to shut down quickly. There were also signs of injury. One of the bodies showed head trauma, which suggested a hard impact, possibly against rocks. Another showed broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder, which could have happened during a struggle in the water. The third showed no major injury, pointing more toward exhaustion and cold as the cause of death. It was estimated that all 3 men died within a few hours after entering the water. Investigators then worked to understand exactly what had gone wrong. Their findings suggested that the raft may have worked at first, carrying the men away from the prison. But as they moved closer to the rocky areas near Angel Island, the situation likely changed. The raft may have taken in water or broken apart. Strong currents could have pushed them into dangerous areas filled with rocks and narrow spaces. Once in the water, the cold and the force of the currents would have made survival almost impossible. Over time, their bodies were carried into a hidden inlet. There, they became trapped and slowly covered by layers of sand, mud, and debris. This natural process kept them hidden for decades. It was only after changes in the shoreline, likely caused by strong weather, that the remains were finally exposed. With all the evidence now clear and confirmed, the United States Marshal Service officially closed the case in 2025. The remains were returned to the families, bringing a long period of waiting to an end. After many years of questions, theories, and uncertainty, the truth was finally known. The escape had been real, the plan had worked in part, but in the end, the men did not survive the journey across the water. If the evidence seemed to finally close the case with the discovery of their remains, then how could new technology now suggest that the escapees might have survived, hiding their tracks from history itself? Let's take a closer look. The mystery comes alive. Joe Rogan, a comedian and the host of a very popular podcast, spoke about the escape in detail. He asked questions that nobody had asked clearly before. He wondered why 3 prisoners would go to such trouble making fake heads out of papier-mâché with real hair if they had planned to die. He questioned why they would risk the dangerous waters if surrendering to death was their goal. His questions were simple, clear, and logical. Millions of people listened, and through this attention, the story went beyond legend. It became a real puzzle that demanded answers. The attention reached experts who wanted to investigate using new methods. A small creative agency in Ireland called TERRIFY became involved. They were not looking for entertainment. They were serious. They had access to advanced artificial intelligence. They used deep learning, facial recognition, and other modern technology to examine the evidence. Their goal was to study the faces, the details, and the clues left behind for decades. They wanted to see what human eyes could not. They wanted to confirm facts, understand patterns, and find answers. One piece of evidence was a photograph taken in Brazil in 1975. It showed two men sitting by a dusty old truck under a bright sun. At first, the photo was ignored. It was old, faded, and blurry. Some people called it a hoax. Others thought it was a coincidence. But IdenTV believed it could be important. They put the image into an AI system. This system could analyze small details like the shapes of cheekbones, the angles of the jaw, the distances between eyes, nose, and mouth. It could compare these details with thousands of images of the Anglin brothers, from childhood to adulthood, including mugshots and sketches made over the years. The results were amazing. The AI identified the two men with high accuracy. John Anglin matched 98.7%, and Clarence Anglin matched 97.4%. This proved what people had long suspected. The brothers had survived the escape. The photograph was no longer just a curiosity. It became evidence. The daring escape had not ended in death. The Anglins had lived, possibly under new names, far from Alcatraz and away from the authorities. Confirming the photograph was only the start. IdenTV wanted to know how the brothers could have survived. They studied the waters of San Francisco Bay on the night of June 11, 1962. Using weather records, they looked at wind, tides, and currents. For years, people assumed the cold water would have finished them, but the simulations showed a different picture. If the escape happened late at night, the currents could have carried the raft safely toward Angel Island. From there, the brothers could swim or find boats to reach Marin County. The waters, once seen as deadly, might have actually helped them reach safety. The team also looked for other clues. They searched global records, travel logs, passport data, utility accounts, and looked for anything unusual. They also examined letters said to be written by John Anglin years after the escape. Using AI, they studied every stroke of the pen, the spacing of the letters, and the style. The system compared these letters to known samples from before the escape. It concluded there was a 95% chance the letters were authentic. Some letters contained repeated phrases like, "It's over." This phrase appeared in letters written both before and after the escape. It seemed to be John's way of sending a secret message, marking the end of something, perhaps hiding or running or signaling closure. Small details like these helped create a bigger picture of the brothers' lives after the escape. Together, the AI's work on faces, letters, and water currents gave a full story. The brothers had survived. They had moved quietly, leaving clues that only careful study could reveal. Machines were able to see patterns that humans could not. Using technology and patience, the team uncovered details that had been hidden for decades. If these men might not have perished as previously thought, then where could they have hidden for decades without a trace? And could the answers finally be lying hidden beneath the waters of San Francisco Bay? Let's find out. The discovery beneath the bay. In the year 2025, a group of engineers was doing a normal survey. They were looking at the bottom of the San Francisco Bay. Their job was simple. They were checking the seafloor. They wanted to see if there were any obstacles that could affect new infrastructure work. It was a normal task. Nothing strange was expected. The team used sonar and other scanning equipment. They wanted clear images of the layers of mud and silt on the bay floor. At first, the scans looked normal, just the usual uneven shapes under the water. But soon, one of the technicians saw something strange. It did not look natural. It was a strange shape. It was smooth and symmetrical. It looked like it had been made by humans. It did not match anything they had seen before. It was not part of any known shipwreck. It was not part of any underwater structure recorded in history. The object was about the size of a small cargo container. It was placed just over a mile from Alcatraz Island. It rested about 60 feet below the water surface. The team was curious. They told local authorities what they had seen. Divers were sent to check the area. The water was not easy to work in. The currents were strong. Visibility was poor. But the divers persisted. They went down several times. Finally, they reached the object. It was a rectangular container. It was sealed tight. Marine growth covered it. Its metal surface had rusted. The locks and seams were old, corroded, and strong. It had been underwater for decades. No one knew how it got there. It was not on any official record. There were no missing ships of that size or description in the area. Everyone wondered what could be inside. When the container was lifted to the surface, the team prepared for a simple inspection. They expected equipment or tools. They expected perhaps some old crates. They did not expect what they found. Inside were human remains. 3 bodies, perfectly preserved, lay on the floor. They were curled up. Their clothes were old and water-stained. They looked like prison uniforms from the 19660s. One body had a crude raincoat vest. Another had a small homemade lantern in its hands. The third had a piece of paper between its fingers. On the paper, in shaky handwriting, was one sentence: "We made it, but we can't leave." The divers were shocked. The container was immediately resealed. It was taken to a secure location. Experts began testing the remains. DNA samples were compared with family records. Dental records were checked. Within days, the identities were confirmed. These were Frank Morris, John Angland, and Clarence Angland, the 3 men who had escaped Alcatraz in 1962. After more than 60 years, there was proof. They had not survived outside. They had not disappeared into the world. They had hidden under the bay. Inside the container, more items were found. A photograph of the Angland brothers as children. A bar of soap carved into a dummy head. A water-damaged notebook. It seemed one of the prisoners had written in it. The writing suggested they had planned their survival carefully. The notebook mentioned that things did not go as planned. It showed they had tried to stay alive while hidden. Marine scientists studied the container. They saw that it had been built for long-term survival. The walls were reinforced with metal. Crude ventilation shafts allowed air to circulate. There was evidence of stored food and water. The airtight container, combined with cold, low-oxygen sediment, had preserved the bodies like a kind of natural cryonics. The men had not drowned. They had hidden in a survival capsule. It was clear they had hoped someone would find them. They had survived the initial escape. But something had gone wrong. The plan to emerge from the capsule failed. Perhaps air ran out. Perhaps the tides shifted the container. Perhaps they waited too long for rescue. Whatever the reason, the men died inside their own creation. This discovery explained many mysteries. It explained why the bodies had never been found. It explained the floating belongings and the incomplete raft found years before. And it confirmed that, for all the rumors and theories, the men had not survived outside the bay. They had only survived in hiding for a short time before tragedy caught them. If the prisoners survived their initial escape only to be trapped beneath the bay, one question remains. How exactly did their hidden capsule work, and what does it reveal about the plan they risked everything to execute? Stay tuned for more. The capsule and the final clues. The container was not just a hiding place. It was a carefully built survival capsule. Experts said it could have been constructed over months or years. It was made piece by piece using metal and other scavenged materials. The walls were reinforced, the seams were riveted. It had a crude air system. Ventilation shafts were present, but the system was not meant to last indefinitely. Inside, investigators found evidence of life, stored food, water tanks. The prisoners had thought of everything. They had tried to plan for survival while remaining hidden. They had sealed themselves away, waiting for a chance to emerge safely. The frigid water and oxygen-poor sediment helped preserve their bodies. The preservation was similar to cryonic storage. Time had nearly stopped the decay. The objects inside told a story. The photograph of the Anglin brothers as children suggested the prisoners had personal memories with them. The soap dummy head showed they had been careful and creative in their planning. Perhaps they had even considered further decoys. The notebook, water-damaged but legible in parts, showed Frank Morris had written notes. Some entries spoke of their escape. One entry said, "Not how we planned it." This revealed that the escape had been a carefully thought-out operation. They had not left their cells recklessly. They had built a plan for survival, but the plan had failed. The capsule's air system could not last long enough. Their attempt to return or emerge safely was unsuccessful. They were trapped, unable to get out. Investigators studied the construction of the capsule closely. It had been designed for a secret underwater life. The interior walls had insulation. They had used salvaged metal to reinforce the structure. There was no renewable air supply, no backup in case of failure. They had counted on being rescued or on conditions being perfect. Neither happened. The location of the capsule was critical. It rested in a narrow pocket of sediment. That pocket had protected it from sonar searches for decades. It had been hidden almost perfectly. If the 2025 infrastructure project had not occurred, it might have never been found. It was like finding a needle in the seafloor. The discovery brought closure. Families learned the truth. The men had survived for a time. They had not drowned in the bay. They had not escaped to another country, but their survival was limited. They had hidden, but they had not survived long enough to reach freedom. Public reactions were mixed. Some called the men tragic heroes. Others called them brilliant, but doomed. Historians and scientists saw it as a remarkable story of planning and human ingenuity. The world finally had proof of what really happened. Alcatraz's long mystery had ended, but the ending was not freedom. It survived for a short time, and then a quiet, hidden tragedy beneath the waters of the San Francisco Bay. Behind the walls of this so-called escape-proof fortress, how many inmates actually tried and failed to break free? Keep watching for more. The daring and doomed escape attempts of Alcatraz. Ever since Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary opened in 1934 on a small, lonely island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, it has recorded escape attempts. On April 27, 1936, Joseph Bowers tried to climb a fence while working at the trash incinerator. He ignored guards' warnings and was shot at the top, falling 50 to 100 feet to his death. Some call it an escape attempt. Others say it was self-harm. On December 16, 1937, Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe filed through their cell window bars and ran toward the bay. Unfortunately, a violent storm hit, and both men are believed to have drowned. On May 23, 1938, Rufus Franklin, Thomas R. Limerick, and James C. Lucas attacked a guard named Royal Klein with a hammer. Limerick and Franklin tried to take over the guard tower, but Limerick was attacked and Franklin and Lucas were caught. Both were sentenced to death for the assassination of the guard. On January 13, 1939, Arthur Doc Barker, William Martin, Rufus McCain, Henry Young, and Dale Stamphill sawed through their cell bars and jumped 30 feet to the bay's edge. Guards quickly stopped them. Martin, Young, and McCain surrendered, but Barker and Stamphill were shot. Barker died. On May 21, 1941, Joe Kretzer, Sam Shockley, Arnold Kyle, and Lloyd Barkdahl took several guards hostage, including Paul Madigan, who would later become warden. The guards convinced them escape was impossible, and the attempt ended. On September 15, 1941, John Richard Bayless tried to escape while doing garbage duty, but the cold water stopped him. Later, he also tried to run during court. but failed. On April 14, 1943, James Borman, Harold Brest, Floyd Hamilton, and Fred Hunter took 2 guards hostage and tried to swim to freedom. One guard escaped and raised the alarm. Hunter and Brest were caught, Borman was shot, and Hamilton hid in a cave before returning 2 days later. On August 7, 1943, Huron Ted Walters tried to escape from the laundry room but was caught before reaching the water. On July 31, 1945, John K. Giles walked out dressed as an Army officer on a launch boat, but officers noticed he didn't belong and returned him to prison. From May 2nd to 4th, 1946, 6 prisoners overpowered the cell house, took weapons, and fought officers in a 3-day standoff called the Battle of Alcatraz. 2 guards were attacked, 3 prisoners died, and 3 others were later executed. On July 23, 1956, Floyd Wilson disappeared from his dock job but was found hiding on the shore after a long search. On September 29, 1958, Aaron Burgett and Clyde Johnson tried to swim away after tying up a guard, but Johnson was caught and Burgett drowned. Finally, on December 16, 1962, John Paul Scott and Darrell Parker bent basement window bars and tried to swim to freedom. Strong currents forced them back. Scott reached the mainland near the Golden Gate Bridge exhausted, and Parker was found on a small rock near the island. What do you think about the escape attempts from Alcatraz? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching as we uncovered the shocking stories behind Alcatraz's most daring escape attempts. If you found these revelations fascinating, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video on your screen to dive into more stories. See you there.